Men, thank you for tuning in to our channel here. Today is all about if you are trying to make your wife happy, if that's what you dedicate your life to, you're going to be sorely, sorely disappointed. It's something that I see many, many men struggle with these days. And I think it's happening more and more now. It's becoming more prevalent. And I can share this from a personal perspective because I was in this position as well. I was one of those guys where I felt like I needed to make my wife happy. Like I needed to provide a better lifestyle, better vacations, a better home, better renovations, more money in the bank account. You name it. This is the trap that we fall into as men, trying to make our wives happy. So, first of all, let's cover 5 reasons why it's a complete no no or a complete failure to try to make your wife happy. First of all, you will burn yourself out. If you are spending time working, growing a business, or in your profession, and you're also a father, and you're spending time trying to make your wife happy, eventually it's going to catch up to you from an energy perspective. Remember, energy is such a vital resource that we have. Our physical energy, our mental energy, our emotional energy, and our spiritual energy. And if you're pouring a lot of that energy into your wife to help her be happier, you're going to be wasting that energy because you need to use that for yourself and do other things in life as well. So that is one of the things that I see men deal with day in and day out is they feel burnt out because they're doing everything that they can to make more money, be more successful, and make their wives happy or make their wife happy. And it's not working for them. It's just not working for them. So you could spend 2 years trying to do that. You can just spend 5 years trying to do that. You can spend 10 years. And eventually what ends up happening is you'll realize that all that time, all that effort, you could have spent that energy somewhere else and avoided actually burning out. You could have been more fulfilled yourself in life. And so that burnout ultimately leads to less fulfillment. But we as guys, we are one of the challenges we have as men is that we love challenges. So we believe that any challenge that comes across us, we should be able to deal with. And I can tell you from personal experience that this one challenge of trying to make your wife happy is one of those challenges you do not want to take on. It is not your responsibility. That's the second thing. You can't fix anybody. It's not your responsibility to try to fix your wife. It's not your responsibility to try to make your wife happy. That's her responsibility, not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be the best husband that you can, to be the best partner, and if you have children, to be the best father you can. That's your responsibility. And yes, you have a responsibility to teach your kids to embed certain morals and values into your kids, but that's not your responsibility as a husband. And I see a lot of husbands trying to do that for their wives, trying to help them. You can say perhaps change their values or do things differently or help them change how they feel about themselves. That's not your job. That's either a therapist's job or someone else who has the professional skills to do so. The minute that you go into fixing mode with your spouse, with your wife, your relationship starts to fall apart. You're there to support her. You're there to provide the resources for her. You're there to be by her side when she needs you. You're not there to fix her. You can't. It's not going to happen. So that's the second thing. The third thing is some women just do not want to be happy. It's not in their baseline to be happy. We, all of us, and this is what psychological studies have shown, is that we all have a certain baseline in terms of our level of happiness and fulfillment. And that typically for the average person throughout their adult life stays the same except for when they get older. It potentially actually goes up. So if your wife is at this baseline, typically in terms of her level of happiness, what you are trying to do by help her, make her happy, is you're trying to help her increase her baseline. You can't do that. She has to do that. There's a lot of deep work that's involved in that. And some people just don't want to do that. Some people feel better. And when I say feel better, it's more familiar to them. It's more comfortable for them to feel less happy, to not feel happy at all. Because we as human beings, we are creatures of habits. We are creatures of comfort. And some people are just very comfortable being not so happy, unhappy, and sometimes even miserable. And if your wife falls into one of those categories, she may need some professional help. And that's not something that you can do for them. And they can only, they can only do so much too, because sometimes people have gone through such a tough time in life that some people just aren't able to recover. Now, I'm a firm believer that anybody can change to any degree. Everybody has the opportunity to. I completely believe that. I believe that if your wife is struggling with these types of challenges, that your wife will be able to shift. But some people don't. And some men spend their entire lives trying to help their wives and trying to help their wives basically feel better about themselves. And it doesn't work. Now, let's talk about your role as a man. Your role as a man is not to make her happy. That's the fourth element. It's not to make her happy. Your role is to be there for her, to add to her happiness. That is the difference. Your role is to add to her happiness. Your role is also not to add to her unhappiness. So you don't want to have bad behaviors or what we call disempowering behaviors that hurt your relationship. For example, if you're out drinking with your buddies all the time and it's hurting your relationship, you're out spending a bunch of time at work and not very much with your family, with your wife, you're not there nurturing your wife. Those are habits that you will need to correct, right? If they are actually legitimate reasons why your relationship isn't working out that well, why they're actually making your wife unhappy. But you're there to add to her happiness, the happiness that she should already have within herself. And if she doesn't have that, you will not be able to add to her happiness. No one can make another person happy. That is, I'm going to say, a failure. That plane does not take off the ground. It doesn't. It just sits on the runway and spends decades just doing circles. It does not work. It just doesn't. Everybody's responsible for their own happiness, because if someone is basing their happiness on external situations, they are forever in control by those external situations. So if something happens in my life, for example, and I base my happiness on that, well, I'm always going to be not in control of my happiness because it's always based on what happens outside of me. But if I have that ability to control my own internal happiness, which I talk about in The Complete Man, the book that I wrote in 2020, as COVID was happening to help men get through that challenge, is we are all responsible for focusing on that inner mastery, that inner control that we have of our level of happiness and fulfillment. And once we are able to master that, because that's a core concept of The Complete Man, everything else in life becomes not only easier, but more fulfilling as well. That is the key. And this applies to your wife as well. The other part is, we talked about burnout. We talked about it's not your responsibility. Some people just don't want to change. Some people just have a basic baseline. But here's something that is even more important, especially if you have children. You can spend a lot of time, energy, and resources trying to make your wife happy because you realize that if your wife is happier, she will be a better mom. But guess what? That doesn't work. Your job is to be the best dad you can. And so by expending resources and energy and time and frustration with your wife, instead of actually spending that time with your kids, you're actually wasting your resources. You're actually going in the opposite direction. So if you've tried many different ways to try to get your wife to help herself be happy and it's still not working, then shift your focus towards your kids. I highly, highly recommend that. And also give your wife a signal that you're not always going to be there as a person to try to help and fix her own issues. That's what she needs to do. And as soon as you start to divert those resources, she may actually get the hint and say, this guy is really serious in terms of what he's talking about. It's actually hurting him. You need to be honest with your wife. You need to tell her what the impact is. You need to tell her what the impact is on her. You need to tell her what the impact is on you. You need to tell her what the impact is on your relationship, on your marriage. You need to tell her what the impact is on your kids and the family unit, potentially even your finances, your mental health, whatever it is for you. You need to make her aware. And if she doesn't shift, then it's your responsibility to take control of what you are responsible for doing, which is being a supportive husband and a good father, and being the man that you need to be to live a fulfilling life. Again, your kids will need you, and you need to it's obviously raising kids in itself requires a lot of time, energy, patience. And if you're spending that on your wife, you're spending less on your kids. Now, when men realize that, when they realize, oh my God, you know what? It's not going to help our family. It's not going to help my kids to focus on my wife. It's actually going to help my kids by focusing on my kids. They change their attitude, they change their tune. And guess what? You become a lot better, because part of that is also this inner guilt that we feel, because a lot of times we feel like we're not being good fathers. In some way, shape, or form, we feel like we're not being good fathers because perhaps we're not in a good relationship with our wife, because we feel like we're putting more energy into the relationship with the wife than our kids, and it catches up to us. It causes us even more frustration. So if you want to be a good father, be a good father. That requires your time and effort. So let's bring it back here. For those of you, for you gentlemen that are struggling trying to make your wife happy, please stop. Stand back, sit back, look at the entire situation, take a look at the entire relationship, evaluate what I've discussed here in this channel, and perhaps even seek some professional help. And if you sought professional help and it's still not getting you to where you want to be, then it's time to take things into your own hands. One of the things that I will say is that couples counseling and couples therapy is not very effective. I'm going to tell you from experience, it's not effective at all, because a lot of times either you or perhaps your wife will not be completely genuine in that conversation with the therapist. Secondly, therapists themselves, a lot of them don't have functional relationships. Let's get that straight. So you're going to someone, it's like a personal trainer who is not fit themselves. It doesn't work, because they themselves don't know how to apply the elements, the discipline, the understanding, the learning, the problem solving that they themselves are speaking about to somebody else and giving advice. So therapy may or may not help you in your situation either. I always recommend it because you got to give it a shot. It's always worthwhile to give it a shot. But if you find it's not going anywhere, then you need to take things into your own hands and do what you believe is the best thing for yourself, most importantly, for your family, and for your kids. It's this concept, right? You've probably heard about it. Win, win, win. It's got to be a win for you. It's got to be a win for the other person and win for your family. If it's not a win for you, remember, and not a win for your kids, or any one of those elements, you got to think twice here. And sometimes we as men, and I'm not promoting this, I'm not saying you need to remove yourself from the relationship. But sometimes the best thing that we can tell our wives is that we're serious, that this isn't working out for us. Because a rude awakening is sometimes needed, not only for them, but for us as well, because we can be attached to our spouses in a very unhealthy manner. So if you find yourself constantly trying to make your wife happy and it's making you unhappy and draining you, then you need to rethink this and do things differently. That's the most important thing.